LangChain4J AI services are awesome. We look at some Stochastic Parrot images, whatever that is. Talk about the Beatles now and then video. I gave my Managing Your Manager talk a couple of times, and the usual assortment of tweets, toots, and skeets. Welcome to the video newsletter version of Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome. This is the week of October 29th through November 5th. Today is the 6th of 2023. And this is the video version of my Tales from the Jar Side newsletter. My name's Ken Cousin. Let's take a look. The subtitle this week is, My wife and I were considering replacing our roof. She was worried about the expense, but I told her it was on the house. Yeah, that was a really bad one. I apologize. Sort of. Let's dive right in. This week I taught my Getting Started with Spring and Spring Boot course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform and my regular software design course at Trinity College in Hartford. And I also gave a presentation at the International Developer Days Conference online. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course, video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and, of course, attractive than the average newsletter reader, viewer, or listener. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the supplied button. That's usually our cue to take a look at the YouTube channel and see how that one is working out at the moment. It appears that I currently have 855 subscribers, so that's a bit of progress. That's good. We were hovering right around 850 last time. The big video this week came out late. It came out on Sunday, in fact. It's called The Magic of AI Services with LangChain4J, and I do want to tell you a little bit about that. So let me go back to the regular newsletter, and then we'll take a look. So let me close this. So I've been spending a lot of time with the LangChain4J project lately. That link brings you to the GitHub repository, which doesn't look like much, but the documentation, such as it is, exists in the README below that. So it says supercharge your job applications with the power of LLMs, large language models. The section I want to highlight this week is the part that says AI services for declaratively defining complex AI behavior behind a simple API. That actually sounds a lot more complicated than it is. Basically, you make an interface and the entire framework implements the interface for you. And in order to contact the language model, you just invoke the methods in the interface. Everything gets taken care of for you. Really nice. So I wanted to do an example, and I mentioned the idea that they already had these things called prompt templates, for example. With a prompt template, the idea is that you could put in a string that had these template variables in them, the thing in the double curly braces, say text in language. Then when you call apply with a map that plugs in values for those keys, if you will, then when you call the text method on the resulting prompt, you can verify that it does in fact have the string with the values plugged in. Now here you invoke the contains method on assert that just to demonstrate that it worked. So this is all not actually submitting it anywhere. It's just demonstrating that we were in fact able to use a prompt template. But here's where it gets really slick. I mean, I could go ahead and continue to use that, but instead of doing that, you can then make an interface, for example, here called translator. It has a single method called translate. It takes a string text and a string language. These @v annotated fields are the variables that get plugged in. Here we use an annotation to indicate a system message. System messages on the AI tools are more global. They set the context so that the LLM has some framework for discussing the question. And then the user message is the question. So the system message here says you're a professional translator into language, and the user message says translate the following text. And by simply supplying language and text, you wind up putting those in the arguments here, and you're all set. So the way you invoke this is like this. So in a test, All I did was use aiservices.create for that class and plug in the chat model. This is the simplest way to put in the chat model. And then you just call the method. Translate hello, how are you into Italian, and the response that comes back is ciao, come stai? I mean, it's really trivial. You make the one interface, you create the service, as they call it here, and it just works. It's really slick. Now, to demonstrate this, I wanted to show something a little bit more interesting. So here it is in the code. So I have a person record. So I'm using a Java record with string first name, string last name, and a local date as the birth date. My person extractor is the interface. The interface here has a user message that says extract information about a person from it. The variable it would mean any single argument that I pass into the method. So the method's argument will be a string called text here. The method's called extract person from, and I'm returning one of those records. I'm finished. That's it. So in order to test this, then what I need to do is call create on the AI services class with that extractor and provide a model. Now this time I use the actual builder to create the model because I want to actually log the requests and the responses. So if you want to get a little bit more detailed, you can use the builder method on OpenAI chat model to create your language model. So the example that they gave in the LangChain4J examples project was this. The text says, in 1968, amidst the fading echoes of Independence Day, a child named John arrived under the calm evening sky. This newborn bearing the surname Doe marked the start of a new journey. I don't know where they get this stuff, but that's what they supplied. So all I have to do is call the method with this and I'll get back a person. I could print the person and then check that all three fields are exactly what you need. And if I run this, you'll see that it does in fact do that. Now, because I put in the logging, you can see here, it says it sent a post request to the chat completions endpoint at OpenAI. There's the headers with the authorization. There's the body. The model is using GPT 3.5 Turbo by default. And the message has a role of user and the content is that text. But here's the interesting part. Let me scroll to the end of that paragraph. And notice what they appended to it. You must answer strictly in the following JSON format. Very good. First name of type string, last name of type string, birth date of type date string in the ISO 8601 standard formatting. And they threw on a temperature. Again, for those who aren't aware, that's just a degree of randomness in the answer. And when you look at the output, we got back a successful request, a response rather. The headers are all here, seeing that we got back JSON data. And inside the body, down inside the choices, message, content, here's our output. First name is John, last name is Doe. Birth date is the correct day, month, and year, which I printed out at the bottom just to be completely clear on that. I mean, that is almost like magic. I mean, all I did was make an interface and said create it. Now, I went digging into it a little bit and realized that a lot of the magic here is happening because of the JSON parser. They're using Google's JSON as their JSON parser. So when they said the return type was this person record, clearly they used JSON to determine what the properties and the structure was, and that's the source of that appended message to explain to the LLM what it should return. Then when they deserialized the response, they were able to turn it into this object. But that's really nice and really convenient. I didn't have to do any of it. So at any rate, that's what all this section is about in the newsletter. And eventually I wound up making this video about it, the magic of AI services and LangChain4J. In there, I talk about setting up the project and running through all their different examples in the LangChain4J examples project, because they have one online and it's really easy to follow. Okay, there'll be more videos in that series. I just don't know which one's going to be next, but I imagine I'll look at tools or retrievers or conversations and then eventually into embeddings and so on. This is all happening while I'm waiting for the Spring AI project to make it to version 1, at which point I could start doing the same thing over there. Let's move on to our next section. I call this Stochastic Parrot. Someone mentioned online they were celebrating Stochastic Parrot Day, and if you look at the Wikipedia article on stochastic parrots, it says in machine learning, a stochastic parrot, oh, I clicked on it, so that brought it up here. Let me magnify that a bit then. A stochastic parrot is a large language model that is good at generating convincing language, but does not actually understand the meaning of the language it is processing. The term was coined by Emily Bender in a 2021 artificial intelligence research paper called On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots, Can Language Models Be Too Big?, that she wrote along with Timnit Gebru, Angelina McMillan-Major, and Margaret Mitchell. So stochastic, as you see here, is a term from mathematics that refers to randomness or involving a chance of probability. And a stochastic parrot is therefore a tool that parrots back what you said to it without any understanding of what's going on, with a certain degree of randomness involved. So that reminded me of this little gag that I heard recently. I said, hey, ChatGPT, what's 9 plus 7? And it says 0. I say, no, it's 16. Said, I'm sorry, you're right. The answer is 16. Good. Now, what's 10 plus 12? 16. It doesn't get it. There's no actual understanding under the hood. It's all pattern matching and inferences. I also find it highly amusing that the logo for LangChain4J's project and on the Twitter feed is this parrot sitting on a coffee cup, while sitting on the saucer holding a coffee cup like that. That makes it LangChain4J. So I thought that was very clever, and I imagine at some point I'll be able to come up with a dead parrot joke, but I haven't got it yet. Maybe next newsletter. So to be silly, I went to DALL-E 3 and said, hey, DALL-E 3, please draw a stochastic parrot. And its response says, see if I can magnify that, I'm sorry, but it seems there were issues generating images for the stochastic parrot. I apologize for the inconvenience. Please let me know if you'd like to proceed with a different request or if you have other questions. I'm like, gee, sensitive much? I mean, it probably wasn't reacting to the request itself, but so be it. So I went into the Midjourney bot Discord server and typed, imagine a stochastic parrot, and here's what it came up with. Within about a minute, it generated these 4 very colorful parrot images with lots and lots of random colors, which I believe is how it's interpreting the phrase stochastic parrot. So apparently to Midjourney, the word stochastic there means lots of random colors, and I can live with that. It turns out that you can also do an AI image generation tool inside of WhatsApp, owned by Facebook. And I figured, what the heck, I have WhatsApp on my phone. So I went to the Meta AI bot inside of WhatsApp and I typed /imagine a stochastic parrot. And here's what it came up with, which again, it's a parrot with a lot of random colors in the feathers. I think the resolution might be a little bit lower, but still lots of pretty colors, and that works. So then while I was writing this newsletter, but before I published it, I figured, what the heck, let's give DALL-E one last try, and said, yeah, please try to render the stochastic parrot. And this time I got 2 of them. It says, here are the illustrations of a stochastic parrot. The patterns on the feathers are chaotic and random, which gives them the stochastic appearance you requested. And yeah, it really does. It's a little funny looking. Those feathers are awfully jagged there. So, I mean, still parrot-like. I'll go with it. I'll take it. Okay, next section. Another AI-related event occurred this week. It was relevant to my life, if you will, and it's that the Beatles released their very last Beatles song. The story goes that back in the 90s, when they were preparing, the mid-90s, when they were preparing the anthology album releases, then Paul, George, and Ringo talked to Yoko, because John had been gone since 1980, and she provided them with an old cassette tape that John had been using to make some recordings of songs he was working on. Now, this tape was already 25 years old or so. I mean, it dated back to the 70s anyway. Maybe it was only 20 years old, but whatever. It was old. And the quality was okay, and they weren't really intended to be done. They were just getting started. It was just keeping track of ideas and everything. And the songs were in pretty rough shape. Now, the 3 songs that were on that tape were Free as a Bird, Real Love, and Now and Then. The remaining Beatles, along with Jeff Lynne, who did all the producing, were able to clean up Free as a Bird, and that was the first song they released off of Anthology 1, I believe. And it's okay. I never thought that much of it, but it was, it was okay. Then they went and released Real Love as a version on Anthology 2, I think it was. And that was better. I actually like that song. I think that's pretty good. Now, it turns out the Beatles themselves, the remaining ones, weren't wild about it, not because they had anything against the song, but because it was actually pretty close to finish, so all they was basically session musicians, although George added a very nice guitar part in the bridge, which I think mattered a lot. So Real Love did well. I've always enjoyed Real Love as almost, I think of it as the ultimate cover song, because, I mean, even the Beatles version's a cover. John wasn't there to finish it. So they did their version of it, if you will, without him. I have stumbled across many, many cover versions of Real Love. And in fact, I think I put a link here to a YouTube playlist that I assembled of all these different versions of Real Love, including a Beatles one and everything. Some of them are really good. I've been very pleased with them. Some of them are okay, but I was just collecting a whole bunch of them. And if you're interested, there's a playlist there. However, the song Now and Then, they gave up on. They said it was just impossible. The audio quality was too rocky, and it was too closely tied to the piano, so they couldn't really separate them in the technology they had at the time. So they gave up on it. Now, last year, as many people know, Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings fame had his project called Get Back, where he was able to take all the old tapes from the Let It Be sessions and create a long 3-day documentary, basically. I think it was around 20 hours of video encapsulating those sessions. And as part of that, he was able to use the generation of AI tools he had available to him to clean up the audio, and it makes a huge difference. He also cleaned up the lighting a lot. Now, the Let It Be movie is by far the weakest of all. Well, no, I was going to say it's the weakest of all the Beatles movies, but Magical Mystery Tour is pretty awful, I got to admit. But still, Let It Be is not a great movie. And the 2 things I learned from the Get Back documentary when my wife and I watched it, because of course we did, was that the director, Michael Lindsay Hogg, really had it in for Paul. First of all, he made him look bad multiple times when he interacted with other Beatles. Maybe he thought that was drama, but it really made him look terrible. But also, he apparently had Paul creating the song Get Back in real time on camera in front of the other Beatles and iterating on it and building what turned out to be one of their classic hits, and chose not even to include that in the movie. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, in the Get Back documentary, that's one of the most dramatic parts of the whole thing, and he left it out entirely. Another thing I got from the Get Back documentary is that Billy Preston was way more influential at that time than people generally knew. He showed up and everything changed. He filled in a lot of the keyboard part on Get Back and many other songs. It was just a breath of fresh air, lightened the entire mood. They all enjoyed working with him. John even talked about having him join the band, which Paul didn't really want to do. They knew they were about to break up anyway. But still, his very presence was massive. And again, he's mostly left out of the movie. He was there during the concert on the roof of Apple headquarters, the famous concert there. Oh, well, they left him out. So I said those were 2 major revelations, and I included a third, but the third is related to the other 2. It's just that maybe the director's just bad. I mean, maybe it wasn't personal. It's just he's just not good at his job. So maybe that's 2.5, something like that. Any rate, the modern state of AI tools allowed Paul and Ringo, but George was gone now. We lost George in 2001, to go back and clean up the audio. And now on the Now and Then video and the audio, it sounds like John's in the room with you. I mean, it's phenomenal. The quality of isolation they were able to get, cleaning up the soundtrack that John prepared, was phenomenal. And Paul added a lot. He did some guitar work. He did several other instruments as well. And he did some harmony, but he really is in the background. Of course, it's been almost another, 25 years since the anthology recordings. So Paul is like 81 years old now. Maybe it's just for the best that he kept his voice in the background a little bit. And Ringo played the drums as well. And it as a Beatles song, I think it's good. It's not classic. It certainly didn't belong on any of the later albums they made that were really high quality. It probably would have been cut from those, but it certainly would have made it onto one of John's albums. It was pretty good. So I liked it, and I just wanted to point it out. It made me feel kind of melancholy, even though my wife didn't have the same experience. Maybe that's because it's a reminder of how long it's been and how old everyone's gotten, and therefore how much older I am as well. But I like the song, and I've listened to it a couple dozen times already. It is a good last Beatles song. That works fine for me. Wanted to mention I made a couple of appearances at conferences and podcasts. One of them is the Stacked podcast, STACKD podcast here, which is part of the Java Pubhouse network. And that has several hosts. The two main ones are Danny Nohosa, who I know from the No Fluff Just Stuff tour, and Keto Man, who I knew from that and from earlier as well. And then they had a third person join, Ian Hlabitz. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name. But we had a long talk together. I mean, we spent a couple hours. I don't know what the resulting podcast will be because they'll probably do a lot of editing. So they've got production value, so it'll take a little bit to edit it down. But we talked about all kinds of stuff, and I really had a good time with that. I also gave my Managing Your Manager talk twice. Once was at Trinity College in Hartford. They allowed me to give a special presentation Thursday evening as part of their Decoding the Future lecture series, whatever that is. The audience was almost all students. There were a couple of faculty who joined and remotely, who apparently had nothing better to do on a Thursday evening, but there were cookies in the room, so that was good. And I've always felt this talk worked best for people early in their career anyway, so that was nice. I also presented it online as part of Bruno Souza's International Developer Career Day, which is at careerday.dev. That was a lot of fun as well. I always underrate, though, how much time and energy it takes for me to give these talks, even when I've already given them before. I mean, it's not like there were going to be any challenges with the talks themselves other than compressing it into an hour. Keeping within an hour is hard for me. But it still takes a lot of focus, a lot of energy, a lot of effort to make sure everything is right and going well and updated and all of that. So it was pretty tiring, but both talks went really well. I had a good time with it. As I mentioned, the toughest part is that, I've already written a book about this. I think I have it linked to the Help Your Boss Help You book, Convert Conflict into Opportunities. It's all about building a relationship with your manager so that you get what you want out of your job, your career, and your life. And there's an audiobook too, in case you're interested. So those went pretty well. I also teach a related training class on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, so I can talk for hours about this stuff. Keeping it down to an hour is tough. I should mention also, this could have been a different section, that during my Trinity course, I made a reference to the movie Office Space and Peter Gibbons and all of that, and none of the kids had any idea what I was talking about. Nobody'd seen it. Nobody even heard of it. I was like, okay, well, maybe Office Space isn't that well known, but it's pretty famous. But come on, it should have been there. But then I mentioned Caddyshack and blank stares all around. I mean, they're saying, well, we're not really into golf. I don't care if you're into golf or not. Caddyshack's a classic. Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis directing, Ted Knight, and of course it's practically the definitive Rodney Dangerfield movie other than maybe Back to School. And I mentioned Rodney Dangerfield, and they had never heard of Rodney Dangerfield. It was at that point I nearly shriveled up and collapsed to dust from old age, but oh well, so be it. I know it's old, but oh my goodness, and I may have to start tonight's class or Wednesday's class with a scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because even though that's older even than the others, if you don't know that movie, or at least some of the scenes from that movie, you're not really a developer. I'm sorry. Okay, let's go to the tweets, toots, and skeets. First, here was the tweet about my talk on Dev Career Day, and he showed a snapshot of a few of the slides early on, but they're really early on, so I'm wondering idly in the back of my mind, I wonder how long that person stayed in the talk. But okay, no, I don't mean to be cynical about it. I appreciate the comment, the kind words about it. Okay, this one is entitled 2038 is not that far away. This was a response to another Mastodon toot, and it said, also your periodic reminder that we are closer to the Y2038 bug than the Y2K bug. Ouch. And in case you don't get that, this is something that IT people pretty much know. The Unix timestamp for the current, quote, era is stored in a 32-bit unsigned integer. No, pardon me, a signed integer, I believe. Right, signed 32-bit integer. And the current era began January 1st, 1970, midnight GMT. That integer will overflow at 3:18:08 a.m., 19 January 2038. This is a link to the Wikipedia page where you can actually see a simulation of what will happen. See, there's the binary part up here. Here's the decimal part. And as soon as we hit 318 or whatever, what's going to happen is the dates look right. And there, we went negative on the decimal version because we overflowed an integer. And therefore, the year wrapped around to December 13th of 1901. Like, oops. Uh-oh. And this is something you can't just fix. Like the Y2K bug, you just had to find everywhere where they stored the year as 2 digits and fix it. This is not something you fix. This is fundamental to using a 32-bit operating system. So the hope is that nobody will be using 32-bit operating systems anymore by 2038. But we'll see. I imagine there's some embedded systems out there that never get upgraded, and I just don't want to be one of those people. While I'm sure I'll be safely retired by that point, what if I'm sitting on a respirator somewhere and it suddenly becomes 1901? I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The next one I called Cubicle Life. It was a comment that said, from the Matrix, wow, this Anderson guy is a slave to the system, but the Matrix viewed in 2023, wow, this guy had his own cube at work. Yes, I spent a long time in cube farms. Even Peter Gibbons at Initech, which is an Office Space reference, had his own cubicle, at least until he knocked down one of the walls so he could get a window view. Interesting little movie. And then for you kids out there, that's an Office Space reference. So are things like, I have people skills, or they took my red stapler and I may burn the place down, from Milton. And hey Peter, what's happening? And jump to conclusions game. Yes, of course. And I see you've been missing a lot of work, Peter. I haven't exactly been missing it, Bob. You know, the movie also has a very young Jennifer Aniston in it, so there's that going for it as well. It's not a classic. It's not a great movie. It's a B movie, but it's a B movie with a lot of great lines in it. You know, it's Dilbert stuff done well, as opposed to Dilbert. Okay, moving on. This was part of a series of Venn diagram posts. This was the ultimate one that tried to show overlaps between things that are too expensive and Broadway musicals. You see Rent here in the overlap, or shocked exclamations like Mamma Mia, and citation styles, which had IEEE and there's Chicago overlapping with the Broadway musicals, and pizza styles on this side like New York's too expensive and it's a pizza style, Sicilian, Chicago again. And then up at the top, they had chess openings. And chess openings was, Sicilian, certainly, King's Indian, Ruy Lopez, Pierce, those are all fine. Oxford's the one that threw me. I don't remember an Oxford opening, so I had to look that up. Turns out there's a variation in the Four Knights game, Scotch variation, called the Oxford Gambit. Like, Okay, that one's a bit of a reach, but fine, and kind of amusing to take a look at the overlapping diagram. This one called capital, it said enter new password, chicken. Password must contain a capital, chicken Kiev, or Kiev. I don't know if the correct pronunciation. I'd have to ask somebody Ukrainian. I mean, okay, I suppose that deserves a rim shot. Yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, it's a weak joke. This one on correlation versus causation, it says every single person who confuses correlation and causation ends up dying, which is true. Of course, so does every person who doesn't confuse them. It's kind of a, being born is a death sentence, as they say. But still, it was clever. I like that. This one I used as the image on the actual newsletter itself, the VC funding opportunity. It says, here's a sticker to put on your product so you can get some more VC funding. It says, now with AI. Yeah, that's everywhere, isn't it? I mean, I like to think my usages of it are real, but yeah, it's getting branded everywhere. Today they announced the Twitter one, the one from Elon, which supposedly is not as good as GPT 3.5 Turbo, but it doesn't have the same guardrails on it. So it'll discuss subjects that the others are not supposed to discuss, and it'll be more sarcastic, which sounds like Elon. And it's going to cost like $16 a month for Twitter Premium or something in order to get access to it. Yeah, no thank you. Not interested. But okay. On the other hand, soon, today, a little bit later today, OpenAI is having their dev day. They're going to do their keynote and their announcement and everything. In fact, I've got the YouTube channel ready to go. OpenAI Dev Day opening keynote will be starting shortly. So when I get finished with this, I'll probably wind up listening to that. And then here I threw in Xeno, got us halfway there. This is the same one from last week. That's the, Living on a Prayer reference from Bon Jovi. We're halfway there. Xeno doesn't care. I included it last week, but I didn't explain it, and I think a lot of people didn't get it. The Xeno's paradox, well, one of them anyway, says I can't get from me to you because in order to get from me to you, I have to go halfway, and then I have to cover half the remaining distance, and then half the remaining distance after that, and half again, and again, and again, and therefore I never get there. Now, a mathematician would say, yeah, that's the sum of 1 over 2 to the n from 0 to infinity, and that's a convergent series, and the sum, in fact, is 1. So, yeah, you get there. It's fine. Yeah, okay. I suppose the sum there would be 2, actually, if you start at n equals 0, because that starts with a 1. Sorry. At any rate, that's the idea. A non-mathematician would go, okay, maybe you don't get there, but you get close enough. So what's the problem? But still, that's the idea of we're halfway there. Xeno doesn't care, blah, blah, blah. That was the gag. And it's probably the only time I'll ever have a Bon Jovi song reference in this newsletter. Here I have the That's Not My Name. I posted this one. I couldn't resist. The Ting Ting song, That's Not My Name, has been playing in my song list a lot. They call me X. They call me Meta. They call me Alpha. They call me Bet. That's not my name. That's not my name. That's not my name. That's not my name. It doesn't quite scan, but you get the idea. And it's just all these major companies that keep changing their name to avoid old associations. I looked up a handful of others, things like Stellantis is Chrysler, Altria is Philip Morris, Academy, I guess, is Blackwater, which that one doesn't fit at all. American Outdoor Brands is Smith & Wesson. And Weight Watchers apparently is now called WW. I didn't put in KFC, which used to stand for Kentucky Fried Chicken, now doesn't stand for anything. But so be it. But of course, is that me just being old man yelling at cloud? Yeah, I guess you could make the argument. So I'll stop with that now. So this week I was very busy. I had all those presentations and courses. The upcoming week, I'm traveling tomorrow to Phoenix, Arizona for a private course. I also have a course on functional programming in Java in the so-called APAC time zone. So that'll be late at night. And I'm doing my regular software design course for the Trinity undergrads. One of them will be remote, of course. So it's going to be a very busy week for me. I hope you enjoy the video, enjoy everything else, and please feel free to subscribe, and therefore you'll get commentary on other issues as well. Take care. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
It's time to tune in. Tales from the dark side, let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Groovy, Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech dose that never ends.